Thank you and good morning. It's my great honor to be here, Your Excellencies and distinguished guests. Thank you. It is my great honor to be here to hold a conversation and hopefully inspire everyone in the crowd about the need to act together. Activists and leaders together can make change in the world. And I am proud to be here with my friend and the Honorable Madam Verveer, who is director of the Georgetown Institute for Women, Peace, and Security, and served as the first ambassador for global women's issues in the United States from 2009 and 2013. And before that, in the White House. She has been leading on women's issues since the 1990s, and there is no better person I can think of to have this conversation about the journey that we have been on. So I'd like to just start by noting, of course, in the 1990s, conflicts and wars were raging throughout the world. I was in Latin America, saw many wars as well as dictatorships, and the beginning of transition and peace processes. Africa, Europe, here, former Yugoslavia was raging, and we had many wars, Afghanistan, just around the world. So I'd like you to reflect for a moment on what happened to bring activists together and create this groundswell that led to the United Nations first resolution on women, peace, and security in 2000, now 24 years ago.
Well, thank you so much, Linda, and it's such a pleasure for me to be back in Pristina. And you know, we've been hearing about what a difficult time this is in the history of the world. You know, they're saying that war and conflict has become the new normal. And I want to salute the leadership of President Osmani and for everyone involved in this great experience for helping us rethink security, because this is a critical time and half the world's population needs to be involved, the part that hasn't been as involved in dealing with matters of peace and security. And so, Linda, it's great to be here with you, and I want to say that we're part of this trajectory that's gone on. I remember so well when I was working for then First Lady Hillary Clinton, when two women from Kosovo, at the time that the crisis here was beginning to turn into the disastrous horror that it was, they came to the White House, Fiosa and Aphrodita, and they talked explicitly. They told her what was happening here, how people were being forced down the mountainside, the atrocities that were beginning to be committed, before much of the world knew what was happening. And I think those two women, like the women of Kosovo, are symbols of the resistance that has gone on, the courage that has taken place over the years, and the resilience to keep going. So I wanted to mention the two of them because I have forever embedded in my memory what they represented in terms of bringing information to us and being part of the larger international community that we are all a part of here today. Linda mentioned the Beijing Women's Conference, and this conference opened with those words of then First Lady Hillary Clinton, that human rights are women's rights. And you know, there were 15 articles that were adopted in a platform for action by 189 countries by consensus. I don't think that could happen today. And those articles went to issues like the economic participation of women, the political participation, and yes, women in armed conflict. And in many ways, it was a prelude for what the Security Council would come to do 5 years later with Women, Peace, and Security Framework. And what that article in Beijing said was that women needed to be fully and meaningfully participating in peace and security and recognize the disproportionate burdens that women have in war and conflict and need to be protected. And that was much of what would then constitute Resolution 1325. And then you had the Bosnian horrors that were perpetrated not far from here. And it was the women in Bosnia with great courage who went to the International Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia. And they testified about what was done to the women in Bosnia, the horrific atrocities, rape being used without abandon, targeted to the women there. And it was their testimony that chiseled rape as a pervasive, systematic utilization as a crime against humanity. And that happened because of their courage. So we have this tremendous leadership over many years that bring us to this point.
Thank you. I would like to note, really, again, the critical role that activists played in crafting UNSCR 1325 and its 4 pillars of participation at all levels in peacekeeping, peace-building, peacemaking, protection from sexual and gender-based violence, prevention of violence against women through prosecution, as you mentioned, end to impunity, and the overall strengthening of women's rights, and the critical role of meeting needs of women in relief and recovery. So we have that essential document followed by 9 resolutions, no fewer, and some of the notable achievements there were enshrining sexual violence, rape as a war crime, setting up indicators to track progress on WPS, and instituting a special representative for sexual violence at the United Nations. Those are just a few of the milestones, but I would like also to note, I think it's 108 countries now have national action plans. There are regional action plans. NATO has an action plan. The US has a law. These are sort of markers on the institutional development, but I know you have always been very focused on results and outcomes. Some of the peace processes perhaps you'd like to mention, but what are the milestones you see along the way that have brought us to the current day?
Well, Linda, as you pointed out, the framework that we are marking today is one that continues to need great attention, and I was listening to the president of Slovenia when she said, we've not made the kind of progress we should in realizing what you just described, women as preventers of conflict, as peace builders, as negotiators, as mediators, working in relief and recovery. All of these efforts need to be completely integrated into the work that goes on by multilateral institutions and governments. And today, this is an evidence-based case. It's not just an ideological framework that was put in place. We know what a difference it makes. Peace agreements last longer when women are involved in the negotiations. Peace agreements happen sooner when they're present at the table. This is something that over time, seeing from the time when Northern Ireland was going through the Troubles, and we had the first ever women's coalition at the table in that peace process to bring to fruition what then resulted as the Good Friday Agreement. Women also bring issues to the table that might not otherwise get there. I heard about an example of what typically happens, which is the combatants on both sides sit at the table and somehow they're going to put together an agreement that is going to provide for lasting peace. Well, that's not what happens in most. About half of the peace agreements end in the first 5 years. And there was one such instance where the combatants, the first thing they did was give themselves immunity for what they had done to the women. So these are not the kinds of processes we need to see to have lasting peace and prosperity come out of war-torn situations. And there is much work that still needs to be done. we at Georgetown do a biennial Women, Peace, and Security Index. It's the first ever index of its kind that looks at the well-being of women. And why do we do this? Because what we see in looking at inclusion, women's political participation, economic participation, et cetera, justice, are women discriminated against? How is that impactful? And security, are women safe in their homes? Are they safe in their communities? Are they near conflict zones? That composite, not just one indicator, but the composite across 3 dimensions, tells us a great deal about the well-being of women. Why is this important? It's about gender equality. In those places where women's well-being is what it should be, and in places where it's improving, those places are much more secure and at peace. The 20 bottom countries in the ranking of 179 on this index are mired in conflict, in instability, in fragility. It's a serious reflection of what happens when the well-being of women is not considered. And so the well-being of women and the well-being of nations goes hand in hand. And that's why this is so critically important.
Thank you. I'd like to delve into a few of the current day challenges. And you noted, of course, still insufficient participation by women in the actual peace processes, though I do want to note that Colombia achieved near parity as one of the outliers in having both negotiating teams be equally composed of women and men. But we have crises around the world now, and you've been very deeply involved over the years in places like Afghanistan and now Ukraine. And I thought we should highlight Sudan as well, where there is just tremendous violence and now an acute crisis of starvation, and as always, affecting women, girls, and children particularly. But would you care to just take on the Afghanistan situation and what leverage is there to do anything about the worsening situation?
I'm glad you raised that, Linda, and I know that shortly we're going to honor the Afghan women. They are undergoing today nothing less than what we see as gender apartheid. There have been about 100 edicts put out by the Taliban to take every right imaginable from them: the right to go to school, the right to work, the right to go into a public park, regulating what they wear, having a male guardian every time they go someplace. Children are being sold, daughters are being sold just to put food on the table in child marriages. Women are dying every 2 hours in childbirth. This is the situation under the Taliban in Afghanistan today, and it's a situation that I don't think much of our world is seeing for what it is. And so we need to call it what it is, because there's nothing the Taliban crave more than recognition for their leadership in Afghanistan today. They want international recognition, and they want normalization. And there is nothing normal about what is happening to women in Afghanistan. And so gender apartheid is something, it's what happened in South Africa during the racial apartheid, the separateness, seeing a part of the community as totally separate, not equal in any way. That is what's happening to women in Afghanistan. It needs to be codified, we believe, in international treaties, conventions, and we need to recognize that this is the kind of leverage that the international community has. Call it what it is, and keep from recognizing the Taliban and normalizing the situation in Afghanistan today.
Thank you. I know we only have a few minutes. I want to quickly note the role that women played in Sudan in toppling the dictatorship of Bashir. and we do not have women's presence at the talks that they hope to put back on in Jeddah. So I think that is one of the key issues at stake there, as well as the role of Ukrainian women going forward. I'd like to move now. We've kind of talked about the dire situation in the world now, but to reflect for the last few minutes on achievements and, of course, the signing of the regional Center of Excellence here, and congratulating Kosovo for this, and what might be the potential you see there, as well as the other regional centers, how they can empower and compel progress.
Well, I think you heard from Kat Fotovac and from Ambassador Gupta what the hopes are for the Center of Excellence here in Kosovo, the region, and beyond with the others. It is an opportunity to ensure that we can accelerate the progress on women, peace, and security if we understand what's working, if we take the lessons from other places. Think of the lesson here in Kosovo on reparations, one of the few places in the world where there's actually been an effort to deal with the conflict-related sexual violence of the past. We need to know what is working, what the data shows, how that can be utilized, how to bring others together, exchanges when one can understand how somebody made progress in one way and they haven't been making the progress, what can bring it together. But I think in the weeks and months ahead, Kosovo, as I understand, has already put together a program to go forward. We at Georgetown are pleased to be part of that effort in implementing it, but I hope that it will enable us to make the kind of progress on this very critical issue that our world has not seen yet.
Thank you, and I would like to throw out just 4 quick points for an agenda of action that I believe all of us around the world can coalesce around, which is really introducing conditionality into foreign assistance packages to require women to be at the table and start to legislate some of these issues so that countries can sign up to them. The use of sanction tools, and it's important to note the the Biden administration has 3 times now used its sanction power to name alleged perpetrators of crimes of sexual violence. So he's using that power that is inherent in the U.S. government arsenal. And finally, I think we need to talk about the reversing trend of women's leadership, because I know we're partners in wanting political leadership and empowerment to be at the top of the list. I salute the 2 women presidents here, and I think we need to pay attention and take measures to reverse that decline. It's an alarming and recent decline. So I want to thank you, Melanne Verveer, and all of you here, and I look forward to all of the inspiring sessions to follow. Thank you so much.